Hello my YouTube friends. I've got more TEMU things to show you. In this video I test 5 more tools I bought from TEMU. Previously in my videos I've done 10 tools for less than £10 each, 5 or 6 tools for less than £20 each, but this time I've broke the bank. Some of these cost almost £30 each, so big spender, and we're just going to try them out, see how they get on. I'm not sponsored, I've not been paid to make any of these reviews for these tools. I've bought these with all my own money. So that being said, let's get into the video. So the first tool I'm going to show you is this dowel maker, and this comes at a cost of £7.79, so it's not exactly breaking the bank. It's all made of aluminium. It does actually feel very well built, and the way this works is there's a blade on the end of this black piece here. You can use the Allen bolts, loosen it, and you can rotate it to each hole. Each hole would obviously mean a different size dowel, from 8mm all the way up until 20. So first things first, comes with 4 screws and the Allen key to adjust the location of the blade. Now this might sound a little bit counterintuitive, but let me explain. So I've actually got a dowel to start with. I've cut the end off here and I just want to see if I can make this dowel into a thinner dowel. Probably gonna fit into the 12mm dowel. So first I need to adjust this to the 12mm dowel, which I'll do now real quick. Make sure they're both tight. There we go. All right, okay. So this is our first dowel, and it actually feels pretty good. The surface is relatively smooth. It's only a little bit more rougher than the original dowel. You'd obviously have to cut the tip off because that's where I've whittled it away so it could actually feed into the hole. But in terms of an actual, you can use it as a dowel, I think that's pretty good. So I think what we'll do now is I'll try it with a hardwood dowel. I'll try it with a piece of walnut and see if we can actually get the same result as that, because that, if it works the same as that, then that's pretty good. 10mm dowel, 10mm hole, and it fits quite loose, not gonna lie. So we're gonna get some glue in there. Hopefully that will swell the dowel up a little bit. I don't have time to wait for this to dry, so I'm just going to do it like this. Now that's actually quite a good result. It's a lot better than I thought it was going to be, but I'm curious to know how well it's going to cut on a hardwood dowel, see if we can get the same result. Okay, so it's a little bit unconventional, but I've used the table saw with the depth stop, and that way it actually fits in the drill and it's a little bit more accurate. Same thing again, I've whittled the top of it just to help with the entry. We're going to give it a go. We're going to go for 20. So that's kind of how I envisioned it in my head, that really rough finish. We'll go down in the sizes a little bit more so I can actually hit this little part here, but that is kind of the result I was thinking of at the minute. Maybe I shouldn't be reversing it out and cutting at the same time. I think that's probably why it's doing that. It's better. I think this time I'm going to go down one size smaller, and I'm not going to reverse the drill bit out this time. I'm just going to try and see if I can pull it out. Right, pull it out slowly. It's kind of the result I was expecting, right? Just because of the way the blade is, it's always cutting sort of across the grain. you're never going to get a fine finish. And because it's a hardwood, because it's walnut, it's never going to be perfect, right? I'm sure a lot of people would say the same. 16mm hole. Let's see. I don't really care about alignment with this. I just want to get it in there. It is a little bit loose. I don't know if that's going to be much of a problem just yet. Yeah, that's very loose. If I just wet it, and then hopefully we can actually see it a little bit more better. There we go. So we've got a very small outline. It's not terrible, but depending on how much of a perfectionist you are, that might be a bit too much. I would probably want it to fit a little bit more snug than that. But then again, the glue hasn't actually dried in it, so it hasn't had the chance to swell up yet. So it could fill that void, but then it might not at the same time. So, I mean, I'll leave that up to you whether or not you feel that's good or not. So, would I recommend the Dowel Maker? I'm going to say yes. However, I would also say that if you're planning on making a already softwood dowel into a smaller softwood dowel like I did, I'd say it's more suitable for that application. Also for things around the workshop, things that are going to get beaten up, then fill your boots. Making softwood dowels is actually pretty easy. The hardwood dowels, again, the result was okay. I'd leave it up to you whether or not you feel that's an actual good fitting dowel or not. For me, I would have liked it a little bit more snug. You know, beggars can't be choosers at the end of the day. I made it by sticking a piece of wood into a drill and then rammed it through a blade, so I don't expect it to be perfect. That being said, it being a little bit loose, one thing I noticed with the hardwood dowel is, one, it was really annoying to set up at first. Because I was trying to make a larger dowel, I had to use a table saw and actually cut the end of it off just so it could fit in the drill in the first place, which took a lot of time anyway, which you wouldn't have to do that if you bought a shop dowel. The second thing was that I ran it through a 16mm dowel hole, and the result of it came to a 15.6mm dowel. And as I actually measured it going further down the dowel, it actually ended up being about 15.1mm. So from a 16mm hole, it's almost 1mm different as it reached down to the bottom, which it could come down to user error. I might have been angling the drill, I might have been wiggling it away where it's just cut a little bit extra on the bottom, but that's exactly what it is. It's user error. If you were to buy a hardwood dowel from a shop, you wouldn't get that user error, and you probably won't get that disparity in the diameter of thickness either, or at least not to the extent that I experienced when I made it myself. So that being said, if you're happy in spending the time and making your own dowels, and you plan on just making random things around the shop, then go for it, fill your boots. I probably wouldn't actually use this in a real situation where I want to make fine furniture with it. I will just go out and buy dowels. They're inexpensive anyway. I would just go out and buy my own hardwood dowels just so I know they're true to size and I can just cut them to size and I don't have to faff about trying to stick into a drill. I am going to recommend it. It does its job. However, just bear in mind, if you plan on making big hardwood dowels, it's a little bit time consuming. The next thing I've got is this mitre gauge for the table saw. And this came in at a cost of £26.91. Right, I'm going to do a lightning quick tutorial on how to calibrate this thing. In the essence of time, I'll just do it really quick. Now, this mitre gauge does fit standard T-slot tracks, which for me, I'm using an Evolution TBL Plus table saw. The slots are 19mm across and 10mm in depth, which again is the usual standard. But the difficulty comes from you can't raise the mitre gauge up. And what I mean by that is at the start, when you're putting the mitre gauge in, it's catching on the lip. And you can see it here. It raises up slightly. It's not the end of the world. It is just a little bit annoying if you're particularly using a wide piece or a thick piece. You're pushing it and it just catches that lip. And I thought to myself, well, if I could raise the whole mitre gauge up slightly, then it would stop that completely and it would stop this from actually hitting the surface of the saw. When you first assemble this, you have two bolts here which you can add in and tighten, and that's what keeps the fence in position. If you actually undo these 2 bolts, you can move the fence back and forth as you wish, but you can't raise it up and down. That is the only position it can be set in, and you'll see why in a little while why that's a bit of an issue. I would have liked perhaps a wider slot on the actual gauge itself, and it would allow me to go slightly up and down, and then that way it'd stop me catching it every time I'm trying to put it in. If there's any slop left or right in the slot, there are 4 washers. There's also 1 hidden at the back here. You can just tighten them up, and then it expands them washers to fill that gap, and then you won't get that slop anymore. Just don't do them too tight because it actually locks it down. So you want it snug but not tight. Get a square, push it against the blade, make sure you're not touching any of the carbide teeth because they protrude outwards, it's going to throw you off. Push it up against the Mitre gauge. We're touching here, but there's a gap here, which means we need to adjust it real quick. Loosen these 4 bolts. And you can see now, we've got a little bit of wiggle room. Hold the square against the blade again, and hold it flush to the Mitre gauge, and then just tighten them bolts back up, and that should remain square. So now we should be square. There we go. So if we just check to see if the stop block is square, we're very slightly off. We're touching at the top, but there's a very small gap, probably less than 1 millimeter at the bottom here. Now when I first tried squaring this, well, when I first got out of the box, this was actually sitting square. So I don't know if it's because it's aluminium, it may have been bumped slightly. It kind of alludes me to the fact that it can potentially go out square, or you could potentially bend it back into square, which I don't really like the idea of. Yes, you could probably shim it in a way where you could probably fix that, but again, similarly, you could probably just bend it back into place, which I don't like that idea. Now, if we go back to me saying it's annoying you can't raise the Mitre gauge up off the surface, what I would have liked is to be able to raise it up off the surface by 1 millimeter, shim this corner a little bit extra, and then that way it tilts the Mitre gauge on a very slight tilt like that, and then that should put the stop block back into square, and we're still not scratching against the top of the surface with the rest of the Mitre gauge. Unless I'm missing something here, or unless you want to try and shim it in a way where you can fix it, then I don't think that stop block's going to be square. Again, you could probably try and push it back into place, but do I want to keep doing that? Do I trust that long term? I don't think I can. Let's just see if we're square. It's a little bit deceiving on camera because it's showing daylight, but that's just because the fence is almost like serrated. Is that the word? Probably not, but it is actually touching top, middle and bottom. So this footage was from when I was making a coffee table and I needed to make consistent squared off corners that were all the same length. So I used the stop block for this and it was square at first. I've no idea what's happened between then and now because it isn't square anymore. But the result was I made 8 cuts and they all turned out to be smooth and perfectly square. Right, let's set this to 45, loosen that. Loosen this, pull that out, and then turn it to 45. There we go. Just a quick one for my Evolution TBL Plus fans out there. If you've got this black extension table for your saw, the Mitre gauge actually hits it, and that's what I hit just now, and that's why I stopped, because something was jamming up and I was worried I was going to get kicked back. So you're going to have to take this off or just extend it out further. Another thing I've noticed is that because of the washer at the bottom here, because it's not perfectly sitting flush in that slot, it catches. So you just have to press it down a little bit and then bring it back in. It is a little bit annoying, I must admit. Okay, that is pretty spot on. I can't find any flaws with that. Pretty good. So would I recommend the TEMU Mitre gauge? Well, first let's talk about a couple of the cons I found. One, the washer and the tip of it always catching every time it fell out the slot. It did get a little bit annoying after a while. I think you could probably remedy that by putting your own longer bolt in. I just don't have one, and it just started to get on my nerves after a while. Two, the stop block not being 100% square, it could throw you off, especially if you're trying to get it, you know, to the millimeter perfect. It could be an issue, especially if you're using a thinner piece of wood, because if you're referencing the numbers on top of the scale, you're tightening that up, and then you don't realize that at the bottom of the stop block it's 1 millimeter out. That could be the difference between you being happy or you getting drunk later on that evening. In terms of the actual stop block though, it does work as a stop block. It doesn't get pushed over to the side. It does sit there nice and securely. So it does work as a stop block. Just bear in mind that it is slightly out. The accuracy of the base plate, I've got no issues with it whatsoever. Of course, you've got to do a bit of calibrating at first, but then you'd be doing that with any Mitre gauge anyway. I did 2 cuts at 0, 2 cuts at 45 and 1 cut at 60. And they all turned out exactly as they should. I've got no issues with the accuracy whatsoever. For the cost of £26.91, I think it is worth it for the money, but I'm not saying this is the best Mitre gauge out there. There are going to be loads out there from well-known brands, which, you know, might cost up to about 100 quid, but they are going to be better than this, and you probably won't have that issue of the stop block, and there probably will be more adjustability to it. Yes, it has its little niggles here and there, but if you're patient, unlike me, it probably won't cause that much of an issue for you. I am going to recommend it, but just know I'm not saying this is the best one on the market. The next thing I've got is this 90-degree corner clamp. You've most likely seen this somewhere online. I think this is one of them unpatented designs which you get 20 different Chinese manufacturers just bulk make, so there's nothing particularly special about this one compared to another one you can find on TEMU or somewhere else. I want to say I paid about £12.86 for it, and that was about 3 months ago. Fast forward to today at the time of filming, it's now £9 and you get 2 of them, so that's epic. I've lost money. This is what it looks like up close. It's just aluminium plating, the clamp it's aluminium, and you've got the handle here, which is probably the cheapest plastic you can probably get. And the idea is that you can get a piece of wood here and then a piece of wood here, clamp this back up, and then that should keep a 90-degree angle, and then you can nail it or glue it or whatever you want to do. It would have been nice if there was a quick release lock here, let's say, and I can just press it down and I can slide this handle up and down a lot easier, because doing this is just a little bit annoying and can be repetitive, I guess. So the first thing I want to do is actually make sure it's a 90-degree, because that is the whole idea of it. Oh dear, I don't think it is. No, there's a gap here. Well, that kind of throws the whole design out of the water, doesn't it? Right, let's see if it's actually vertical. And no. Because it's lacquered, it's just been spray painted, I assume. The corners, there's a slight sort of curve to it, so it's not a sharp 90-degree point. But even then, the gap at the bottom is smaller, and as it goes up, the gap gets wider, so I know that's still not 90 degrees. So at the moment, it's not even 90 degrees here, and it's not even 90 degrees vertically either. So we'll get some wood in and see if we can actually get any decent results out of it. All right, let's try that. Now these 2 pieces of wood are the same thickness. I think you can get away with slightly different thickness. I think the more varied thickness the 2 pieces will be, the clamp might struggle to clamp it properly. But for this experiment, I think we're pretty good here. We are flush. So the idea now is that you can glue it, you can nail it, or you, in my case, I'm going to countersink some screws in. We'll give that a go real quick. I'm not entirely sure where's the best place to hold the 2 pieces when you're drilling. One thing already is that I'm starting to get a bit of a lip here, and I think that's because when I've clamped it, because this isn't perfectly vertical, the piece of wood is almost slightly tilted like that, so it's almost created a little bit of a lip there, which you kind of have to twist back into place. We'll try it. We'll screw in some screws, and I'll see that it's already got to try and so finicky. I can't tighten the clamp any more than that. All right, we'll get some screws in. So we've still got a bit of that lip I was just talking about, and if I get my square, yeah. So after I tested it with the first joint, I'm not even going to bother with the second one. I don't think that you're ever going to get a 90-degree joint with this jig, purely down to the fact that the inside walls of it aren't even square in both the horizontal and vertical plane. So when you go to clamp the pieces up, the wood obviously conforms to them inner walls, and because they're not square, the wood pieces don't align up square either. Again, I think it's one of them unpatented designs that Chinese manufacturers take advantage of. You can find them pretty much everywhere on TEMU from loads of different companies. I think this is one of them great examples that people face with websites like TEMU, that it is just pure junk, don't buy from it. And this is a great example of that. So I'm not going to recommend it. Don't waste your money. Even though they are cheap, what's the point of it if it can't even make a 90-degree joint? So the next thing I've got is this giant 800mm long framing square. And I'll be honest with you guys, I only bought this because it was the longest one I could find on TEMU, and I wanted to see if it was accurate. It's got a shoulder to it, so you can rest up against a workpiece, and that's what you can square off. It's also got holes that start from 0mm all the way up until 800 for every millimeter in between that. So I've just drawn one line with this. Now turn it over, and already I feel like this might actually be out of square. Yeah, okay. So if you look here, the lines are actually touching. They go up and they start to spread out, and that's an indicator that the square isn't square. And the reason why I tested it like that is, for example, let's say my hand is my square, and you can see that it is currently at an angle, right? So if I then swap my hand over like I just did with the other ruler and then square it up, it's going to look something like that. And then if I look here, the difference to the top of the two lines here is different than it is to the bottom. So if you've got an accurate square, the distance between here should be the same all the way up at the top there. If we just look to see if it matches up my other square, I don't know how well you can see this, but there's a gap at the bottom, and as it goes up, that gap closes. So if I do the same test with my black square, getting the same thing again, we've got a gap going all the way up until the tip here. And the fact that this and my silver square have both said the same thing makes me confirm that this isn't square. All right, so the only thing I can really test now is if the holes in the middle are accurate as well. So we're going to do one at 100, 400, 800. This line is 100. I appreciate you can't see that very good. No, we are off by 1 millimeters or 1 millimeter. Yeah, we're off by a millimeter. Oh, that's not looking good for the square, is it? The 400 is slightly more accurate, but we are probably talking still off by a millimeter. And we're 801 millimeters. So the 400 and the 100, they were 1 millimeter short, whereas the 800 is 1 millimeter long, which isn't the best. So I've got my 1 inch thick block, and I'm going to be pedantic here. We're not bang on, I mean we're not far off, we're 0.5 millimeter off. But if you need that as proof, as the measurements are off, even by 0.5 millimeter, there you go. It's a little bit disappointing, especially because I had high hopes for this. I bought loads of different squares from TEMU previously, and they've all been really accurate. I think with this, I was just testing it a little bit too much. It's really long. The chances of it being out of square are actually quite high. But the fact that even when I put my silver and the black square against it, which are a lot smaller, even that wasn't sitting square in this little corner here. So because of that, I'm not going to recommend it. I wouldn't even recommend it if I was going to use the numbers to measure with. So don't get it. It looks nice, but I just don't think it's good enough. If you want accuracy, that is anyway. So the last thing I've got is this handheld drill press. This cost me around £26.71. Now I know what you guys are thinking. You guys are thinking, well, that's just a woodpecker's drill press. That looks exactly like a woodpecker's drill press. No, the manufacturer for this one is Guangzhou Feng Senji Ji Zhu Zhang Gongxi. You know, that family name brand that we all hold dear to our hearts. It actually looks a lot different to a woodpecker's. If you look at the images online, the base plate on this has measurements and extra holes. The woodpecker's is more solid. The chuck is actually more like an electric drill on this one. You can actually just tighten it with your fingers, whereas the woodpecker's you need an actual chuck key. And the top of it is different as well. This one has more of a handle, whereas the woodpecker doesn't. So I'm not going to go war and peace for showing you this, because I'm sure you guys have seen many of these already. But the main factors are, you've got the keyless chuck, which is exactly what you'd expect on an electric drill. It's no different. Just put the drill bit in and just tighten it with your fingers. That's nice because you don't need any extra tools. You've got the depth stop here, which is just a singular bolt with a knurled brass knob to it, which seems very well made, in fact. And that's what's going to be your depth stop, so you don't over drill. So I guess the only thing we've got to do is put a drill bit in and tighten it up. First, we're actually going to see if it holds the drill bit in place, which, yeah, feels like it does. So now we just get the drill onto the hand drill chuck. There you go, like that. So the first thing I want to do, because I don't want to drill all through my work surface, is I'm just going to set the depth stop to only drill slightly through my work surface. And I didn't notice this at first, but there are like sharp grooves around the circle of the base, and then that way you can actually line up the corners with the lines of the cross. So now when I drill into that, that should now drill straight into that hole. So, right, let's give it a go. That didn't want to drill at all. I wonder why that was. Right, different battery, let's go. Okay. Ah. I see the problem there, that came out the chuck slightly. That's as tight as I can physically get my fat fingers to do. Alright, we'll try that again. It's really struggling, and I'm almost thinking that it's not transferring the torque from this into this chuck very well. Let's just see to make sure it's not actually the drill itself. No, well, it's not the drill or the drill bit itself, because that went in fine. I've never actually owned one of these before, so I don't know how common of a problem that is. Okie dokie, right, let's go again. Okay, we'll hit the depth stop. And then the other method I thought to try and see if this is square is actually get the drill bit back in there. actually get a square to it and see if it's 90 degrees. Okay, I mean, it is 90 pretty much. Okay, so we've done the same thing again, but this time I'm not going to go all the way through because this is too thick to go all the way through, but I've made my cross again, and then I'm going to stick the drill bit in and then measure or square the drill bit again. One thing you got to remember is that you got to bring the drill bit in and out so it can actually get rid of all them loose chips. That seems to be more apparent using this jig, so that might be a good sign of it actually being vertical. That went in a lot better than the softwood somehow. Maybe I just wasn't using it properly. That has gone in perfect. Right, our intention is we're going to get this insert and the bolt in. We're going to pretend like it's a table. So I've got a bigger bit in. I'm just going to follow that same hole I made originally. Bit of struggle there. I'm just going to countersink it like I would with a real insert. So we're going to treat this as if it's a final table. I have noticed we've got a consistent depth all the way around it, which is a good sign, which means it hasn't gone in at a wonk. I think that's as flat as you're probably going to get it. So it works. I just thought of another way to see if it's actually flush. Let's do it like that, which was probably self-explanatory to some, but still a perfect 90, so very pleased. So would I recommend the drill press? 100% yes. I can't find any flaws with it. We had a bit of an issue at first with the torque transfer from the main drill to the extension chuck, but that was just a one-off. I don't really know what caused that. It might have just been me, you know, being an idiot with the drill and not tightening it properly. It worked. I drilled about 3 inches deep into that sapele block in the end, which is a lot deeper than what I would normally use for a threaded insert. I can't fault it. And it's made me start to raise questions about these companies such as Woodpeckers that feel like they can charge 200 quid for one of these. I can't see the reason why you would rather spend 8 times as much on that than you would on this. The manufacturer had some crazy Chinese name, but the front of it actually says Fonson Tools. So I don't really know what's going on there. Fonson Tools might be a reputable brand. I haven't actually checked, to be quite honest. But it's a good tool nonetheless. I would 100% recommend it. And that is going to be the end of the video. Overall, I've got some really good tools today that I will be using in my later videos. Again, I feel like I need to say this every time. I'm not sponsored. I bought everything today with my own money. If you've got any tools that you want me to review in a later video, or a type of tool that you want me to review, then just let me know in the comments. I'll have a look and see if I can find any ones that are decent on TEMU and test them out. But other than that, I will see you guys in my next video, which should be a coffee table build, which I'll probably use some of the tools in this video for. So until then, I'll see you later. Cheers.